How you doing?
Yeah, I'm, you know, just getting up for the day. I don't know, just this whole week, just going through a lot of self-doubt, a lot of fucking insecurity, um, just like questioning if I'm prepared for shit. I have such bad imposter syndrome when teaching yoga. It's crazy.
Really?
And maybe to some extent it's healthy that I'm not like, oh yeah, let me teach you, but at the same time, I need to remember that the thoughts that are discrediting me and like saying that I can't do something are just as false as like any other thought. I tend to believe those ones a little bit more easily. So, yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, those tend to be at the forefront sometimes, and yet it's just they flutter on by. Yeah, I've been packing today, and yeah, just kind of certain thoughts will come up about, move, shifts, changes and everything, and then like I'll go through some emotions, and then as soon as it's like not thinking about it anymore, like kind of settles, like it really is. If you're focused on it, that's what it is in the moment. And it
Mhm.
like they pop up and then they settle, and then like you're okay. And there's almost like more space I'm finding, like in my mind, with all these shifts and like just uncertainty, because I've always kept a lot of different things in mind, tried to maintain like a lot going on in my life, and just like keeping tabs on different things from past stuff. And yeah, I'm very excited because there is this side where it's like a lot more space, and just like
Oh, yeah.
room to be myself, because it is less like concerned considerations and more like moving forward considerations. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
exciting.
I mean, it's it's also kind of like a good sign when a bunch of shit is coming up and I'm feeling really uncomfortable because then I know, okay, like we're breaking new ground here. And my brain is scared and uncertain. So it's feeding me, all the habitual thoughts that it thinks is going to keep me safe because it's going to keep me from meeting that new challenge. But like when you can see the thoughts for what they are and not just immediately believe them, you're like, hey, wait a minute. Is that true? And all of the time it's no. And then it's like, okay, well, I'm right here, right now. And there is a next thing for me to do. So let me do that thing and then do the next thing and then do the next thing. And then all of a sudden things are changing. And yeah, it's like you've always been okay the whole time. Even when you felt more tumultuous, like in a week, you're not going to really remember what that felt like. Or in a year, you're not even going to remember most of the shit that happened that scared you. So yeah, just trying to remind myself of that in the moment and just like keep fucking chugging because sitting in one place has become its own prison for me. Like it's the expanding awareness to more space feels amazing, but then it forces you to change. And that's uncomfortable as fuck. But on the other end of that is sort of relief. And like that relief is not going to be permanent. Um, but like it can be like an underlying faith in yourself that like no matter what you're going through, what's happening in the present moment or how it goes, like you are gonna keep be fine. You're gonna keep existing and like you're gonna do your best, and that's the best that you could expect from yourself. So like what are you gonna do other than your best? And if you did your best, why are you gonna beat yourself up for it? It just doesn't make sense anymore. Um, but you also can't run from the change when you recognize you're doing it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then like you go through some shift, and then like you were saying, like on the other side of that, there's other new things that shift, but like, facing fears, going through things like it can like it you're there is something as much as, oh, it's just like uncertainty, uncertainty, uncertainty. It's like there is something being built kind of, I'm finding, and like just kind of looking forward to seeing where that discomfort and like not putting my typical preferences and wants first. Like, what is that, experience like? And we do it in lots of different ways, from like even just, at a restaurant, like ordering something new, trying something new that maybe isn't your immediate go-to. And then all of a sudden you find out like, oh, there's something that I didn't even know that I liked. And then yeah, you keep going through those things, but then it's like, right now for me, it's moving. It's completely shifting environments totally, and not really holding on to any guarantee of the future, like not having any plans besides what we have with dualistic unity scheduled. And so it's kind of keeping everything very open-ended, which is allowing for me, I think, a lot more space to just be like, oh yeah, no, it's like the suffering is when I start thinking about stuff. Like the mental suffering is just when the thoughts will come up, and then it's like prioritizing those and looking at those is all reinforcing this sort of sense of me, like where all the stuff comes from. And so yeah, I mean, it's going to continue, because like you can't shift and change without going through discomforts and like not having so much of a sense of even like what you want, like with the apartment, for example. Like there's certain types of apartments that like look really cool there, but part of me is like, yeah, but what if I got something that maybe I wasn't like didn't quote unquote want, or like wouldn't be my immediate sort of thing. Like what can I learn from that? How can I grow from that? How much faith in myself can I build from that? And just doing things like that, and
That's interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, or like you said, like ordering something different on the menu, because I'm totally the person that if I find something I like, I just back to back to back. I just, and I'm like, yeah, I could eat the same thing for every meal, like if I like it. Um, but I always find it worthwhile when I try something new. And even though it's comfortable and safe, and like I feel like I know what I'm getting and I go after the same things, I can't fully avoid the uncertainty anyway. And it's kind of avoiding building that strength and faith in myself, and just like an openness to experiencing whatever the fuck, because I know I'll be fine. Yeah, so I like that. Like that's, it wouldn't be something that I would think of to like get an apartment that you kind of don't like, to as like a challenge to yourself. But who knows? Maybe it could be cool. I mean, when you don't need anything, you don't need anything, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, and just like seeing where those needs aren't as necessary, because then like I feel like so much more opens up when it's not like being dictated and directed by like this very narrow, like, I want this. This is my preference. And it's like, yeah, but what would you be without all those things? Like, what would you be without those wants and preferences and like the immediate following of those things? Like, how much more space would be opened up? Because those kind of like, I'm just, I'm sitting a lot more with like how many things can kind of cloud your mind, or like cover up a, like what relaxation's there, or like freedom's there, and whether it's, you know people you keep in mind, preferences you keep in mind, thoughts about yourself you keep in mind, like how many of those, as you start looking at them and pulling them out and being like, okay, but what if I didn't choose that? Like how would I shift and change? And it can be like, you know big shifts, like moving environments, or small ones like, ordering something different. off a menu, and like what's on the other side of that is exciting. Like there's a side of it that's like a little bit uncomfortable, but also a side where it's like, yeah, but what's there? Like what could I
Mhm.
be? Like what is, and that's I think finding out a lot of your, potential and just like having faith in yourself. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, no, that's I like how you put that of how much stuff is just fogging because underneath your life is already perfect. Your life is already happening exactly as it should. You don't need to be thinking about or judging every moment to continue existing in that moment. So, yeah, and you put it's easy to put that in perspective when you imagine looking back at this time in like 10 years and you're going to be like, "Oh my god, I was just 23 living in my first apartment, like just having fun all the time. And right now I'm like, holy fuck, like everything is chaotic and like up in the air and I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing and I'm like trudging through my self-doubt to keep moving forward and none of that's going to matter. Like none of the specific thoughts actually matter long term and it's funny like how overwhelmed I can make myself feel just on a daily basis going about my tasks just because I'm trying to figure out and control an outcome in my mind and that never actually fucking gets me anywhere. I think all of that is just an avoidance of like you said that space cuz there is a thrill to it and I think um I tend to err on the side of comfort instead of excitement and curiosity. And I think we need a balance of both. Like, I think that's because I do think we're meant to kind of oscillate in and out of clarity, or like, it's okay if we do, at least, because it's what happens anyway. So, like, it's not about completely being clear 1,000,000% of the time, but I like that, just even in small ways, pushing yourself into that uncertainty, but in the direction of your excitement. And that's I think where like free will comes in. Still don't know if that's like really fully a real thing. Lots of conflicting thoughts about free will, but in my experience, I can make decisions and those decisions play out. And maybe I'm not the one making the decision. I have the experience of being the one making the decision. So I guess it doesn't really matter. The outcome is still the same. Um, but yeah, like we have a way to like guide the flow. We're not fully in control of how that flow is going, but like we can almost like how the railroad tracks you can like split onto different tracks like by pulling a lever. That's like what our free will is. And then the rest of it is the train is kind of going and that's the flow of you already happening. So once you put yourself in that new situation, it'll play out kind of without you having to do much more than that.
Mhm.
And the change just kind of happens. Like you don't really have to force it to happen, but it's about like having the courage and the faith in yourself to make that decision that you originally like have some fear and hesitation about. That's like my signal these days. Like if I'm like, oh, I don't know, should I do it? Should I say it? And I'm like, fucking let it rip because because that's my intuition pointing me, I feel like, in a direction. And I never tend to regret those moments. Those are always the moments where I learn something about myself or like somebody reacts in a way that surprises me. So I'm like, oh, maybe how I thought they were going to judge me wasn't wrong. And I was just judging them. That's crazy. Wow.
Right? Yeah, like superseding that state of judgment onto someone else, like assuming that you're going to be judged because only because you're judging people as being judgmental. Like that one, I came across a video talking about that a little bit like a couple months ago, and that definitely hit different with like fear of judgment is just like superseding or superimposing or super something, doing it before anyone else has a chance to do it. And it's the same for like, yeah, it's self-judgment, judging other people. It's all just like assuming there's a right and a wrong, like a correct and an incorrect. And when it comes back to yourself, like that's our most sensitive spot right there is like, my image, how I see myself, whatever. And it's like being willing to look at that. It's definitely for me getting more and more real, I think, like that, like the action, the application, all those things, and like real in the sense that thoughts about myself aren't as much, and like as much as they will and they do, like as I've had more space, it's like there's less space thinking about myself as much and a little bit more freedom. Like unless I'm on a camera like this, the thought about how I'm looking or all that sort of physical stuff doesn't hit nearly in the same way anymore. It's like almost like it's fading a little bit, whereas it used to be less faded, like more solid in my mind a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, fading is a good way of describing it because it's definitely still there, but it's just less and less, we're chipping away every time that we like catch ourselves getting caught up in a thought about ourselves and the way we look or the way we're being perceived and we question it. That's kind of breaking breaking down that neural pathway because it gets built by repetition and reinforcement and like just stepping in those moments and being like, no, and you're not going to catch it every time. I definitely don't catch it every time, but I definitely do a lot more. And now I think about it a lot less. Like probably probably like 3 years ago, if I had to come onto a Zoom meeting, I would do a full face of makeup. And now it's like, bitch, I'm gonna roll out of bed and you get what you get, okay? Like that's kind of that's and that's just a testament to me just caring less about that. And it's definitely not completely gone, but it's cool to see it fading. And it's like as that's fading, more space is opening. And I feel like my conscious experience is a lot more open in general. Whereas it used to feel kind of bogged down and like small, like the bubble of like my awareness around my head was tiny. And now it's like I feel like I'm more in the whole room I'm in, or like it's weird to describe where my consciousness is, but I feel like you get it. And yeah, like I'm in an orb of some sort.
I feel that because over the last couple months, I've definitely had my fair share of full body clenches and whatnot, and that sense of it like compressing, it's almost like that. Like it feels like that versus relaxation is like more of that expansion. And a lot of it is when it's circling around thoughts about myself for how I'm doing, which are assumptions too, but they come with the wants and the preferences and like, yeah, but me, but me, Mm. And like how much that'll just play in to our life and that being, you know, how we were raised, was like, well, I don't know how you were raised exactly, but from previous conversations we've had, it's like, put your head down, discipline, work
Yeah.
hard, get whatever you want. Like the American dream sort of thing. Like the whole cut like it's it's like big, but it's not because it's like individual, but like a lot of individuals doing it. And like it all goes hand in hand. Like the application is definitely hitting a lot more for me, like way more for sure. And like doing things and like, moving. Another application of just here we are, this is it, I'm doing it. And it's exciting because it's like I never really knew where I wanted to live as I got older. Like had New York
Mhm.
for a while, but like not gonna the thought of being here for long term is like always knew it wasn't gonna be long term. And so now it's like open this spot, going to Vancouver Island, going to Nanaimo just makes a lot of sense. It's a beautiful place and like obviously with work and all the opportunities we have there, dualistic unity and people are I feel like as we start sharing more and posting more videos and stuff, there's gonna be like a good bit of people just being like, wow, that seems like a really cool place. It seems like they're having a good time in Nanaimo there, going to and bouncing around and doing all sorts of different stuff. So who knows where it's gonna turn out or what it's gonna turn into, but it's
Mm.
yeah, just stepping into that sort of like an open space, it feels like, or a door with just having no idea what's on the other side and just stepping through. And like obviously having some idea of what I'm being overly
Mhm.
dramatic with that. It's like, dualistic unity we've been doing for a while, but it feels like it's a new beginning in a lot of ways. Like another door has opened and it's stepping through that. And then that's gonna, I'm sure, open up all sorts of other doors. And like every day, probably gonna feel a little bit more like new door here, and new door here, and new door here. And like, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be done once you're in Nanaimo. Like you arrive, you moving there physically is not the change. The change is going to be existing in that new environment, and it'll be cool to watch that unfold. And seeing you guys all together, I'm definitely gonna have FOMO for sure. So uh, I'm excited to get up to the island at some point. But yeah, it's exciting just to test your limits and do something that was you never thought was in the cards for you, and it kind of like breaks you free in a new way. Like you said, stepping into a new empty space, a new potential that you never knew could exist. The same way you did when you stepped into dualistic unity as your job. You know what I mean? And so it's just the next step. And you're not like locked on the island permanently. You can never leave. Like it's not like you if it doesn't work out for any reason, you wouldn't be able to move. So there's no need to take any one decision so seriously because none of them are all that consequential, even though at the same time they are because they change you forever. But it's just gaining more context, seeing more of yourself. You just view it that way that you're going to Nanaimo to see more of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, because what's the alternative, right? Like, what's the alternative to stepping into new things? Not doing it and like not finding out and trying to maintain a certain perspective. And I think that's where I've, you know, sort of gravitated, but also not. It's like because it's not black and white. It's
Yeah.
you're doing it all the time. Like there's always opportunities to do
Hmm.
it and like kind of see what you're made of. So it's not this black and white thing, but there's certain things, of course, that are like, you know, a move, a shift in relationships, shift
Hmm.
in, having different conversations. It's like they do play out and they all seem small, but it's like the more you jump into all those, the more you start to shift and like see what you are capable of. And especially the things that are like uncomfortable or maybe you're afraid of, or just anything that may pop up, like looking at those and being like, okay, if that is in the way of like more freedom or more relaxation, maybe it's a great indicator. The things you're afraid of or the things that you're you know uncertain about, like what am I on the other side of that? Like what else could I be capable of if I could do that? What else could you know?
Yeah, it's like you simultaneously feel pulled to something, drawn to something, and you have this hesitation and the fear. But like you said, what's the alternative? Not doing it and then living with the you still have that pull to do that thing. You can't hide that from yourself. So it's almost so much fucking scarier to stay there. And it just that's when you start to kind of stagnate, like a part of the river that got caught up in the mud over here, trying to be safe. Maybe the flow got too fast and they were like, okay, let me, and then you stagnate and then you start to have mosquitoes breeding in you. You know what I mean? So we got that was a tangent, but
Oh no, I hear you. Yeah, I
it
hear you. Because yeah,
doesn't feel good to stagnate. You want to keep moving, and it always feels good when you finally do, and you're like, oh wow, like I am capable of so much more than I gave myself credit for. And like all of that doubt and the beating myself down and holding myself back, it's unnecessary. But it's about just continuing to do that and jump in. Um, and I've been trying also not to judge how quickly I make those leaps because I definitely do. And I'm like, I see that I've been doing things, making leaps a lot, and my life has changed completely since I like became involved with dualistic unity. And um yeah, it's tempting to, I don't know, kind of apply the old mindset of like you need to be doing more faster, you need to be like getting somewhere quicker to this and to my growth. And that's no, it's so fucking counterproductive. It's just like the last little grasps at control. And um yeah, so judging how quickly you make the leaps actually gets in the way of making the leaps, I found. And it's just like shut the fuck up and just like go do shit. Like exist outside of your mind. And every time I do that, it's like, okay, well, things are happening. The ball is rolling. And the only reason it wasn't, or I believe that it wasn't, was because I was thinking too much about it rather than like rolling it.
oh yeah, oh for sure. Yeah, because at this point, like, yeah, even with the move and like yeah, the stagnation definitely resonates. And yeah, at this point, it's like here we are doing it and shifting, and it was just like resistance to growth, resistance to
Mhm.
change, and like been able to do all this stuff remotely, but like it has been something that I've seen that's like, yeah, no, it's time. And so now it's like here we are leaping, see what's on the other side and find out. I mean, I already spent a few weeks there, and so getting a sense for just like the area, some apartments and whatnot. We'll see what we end up going with. But yeah, I'm excited to see what's there and just see what other things shift. Because again, it's like the moves don't shift you directly, but they're a component. It's like as
Mhm.
much as it seems like a big shift, it's just a little decision, and then those build on each other. So um I know
But
we got like an hour, so you want
yeah,
to get into some yoga?
fuck yeah, I do. Let's do it.
Been a
All right.
minute. I'm excited.
All right. If you have a blanket, you should grab it.
Okay. Yes, I do.
Or just something cushy to sit on.
Yes.
Okay.